When I started this project, I just started making art. I didn't think about any activism. I was taking care of my own questions. But it is a political piece, and it does generate conversation, and when I decided to commit myself to it, that was part of my reason to take it on as a long-term project, was that it had the ability to generate conversation, so become an activist in a way. My grandpa was an activist and wrote almost every day, as I recall, letters to the editor in Des Moines, to the Register and Tribune. That was his response to, I don't know, conversation and generating. So I guess I grew up with people who, both my mom and grandmother were school teachers. So there's always been like a volunteerism or activism and a culture of that in my family. So that's not a role that I'm not uncomfortable with that role. I brought in some plates that I recently painted from different states. So Virginia is unusual. It's number 2 behind Texas, and there's not much choice. The menus usually, they either decline a meal or they ask that the contents not be released. So there's very few Virginia menus with specific requests. I think they've done that to keep not having a lot of attention about their high numbers of executions as compared to Texas. So this is the largest plate that I've painted of 21 September 2011, and this is the last Texas meal request. Actually, there's text on the back too. I can read it. After this large request was not eaten, Texas stops allowing final meal selections. All future inmates served standard prison fare. Another plate that I brought in is a Virginia menu for cubed, it actually says fried steak diced into little squares. You can't have a knife, of course, because you might hurt yourself, and so that was cut up into little pieces and then put back together like a puzzle. That's been done a few times. So this was served in a styrofoam box for this Virginia 1990 menu, and on the back is the description of the meal and some of the information about the execution. This is poem is by Robert Johnson, who's a law professor at American University who worked with this client and attended the execution. So I wanted to include that writing. Well, I'm a painter by training, and there's paintings in this office that I've done, but most recently I have combined my love of narrative painting, different than the Last Supper piece, which is more illustrating the final meals. My studio year is about half and half, with half spent on the final meals and half on lighter projects. So it's currently lighter project time of year, and after encouragement from Clay, I combined the two, mineral painting, or china painting as it's commonly called, with the narratives. And this is some examples of that. So this is a self-portrait on a found plate. So the bird was already there. And this is actually a church that was already there, and I added the woman. These are personal narratives that nobody but maybe me and my family would know on those two. And this is stories about bananas. And so actually this one ties in a little to the Last Supper being food, but it's not about capital punishment. And my mother-in-law's 4-inch heels. So it's actually been really freeing to explore a new material. Narrative painting has been done by a lot of people, but there is not a lot of narrative china painters out there that I've seen. So I actually feel like this is really wide open and light and a good balance for my serious projects the rest of the year. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Some people have asked me if I'm going to paint colored plates. Clay sometimes nudges me, why don't you try another color? No, I don't want to paint other colors. You can't buy like cadmium red it would be toxic to apply the way that we apply it, and so it's more of this sort of rusty color, and so I couldn't do realistic colors, and so I like to limit it. I have an idea of, the first plate I did was actually full color, and that's where I realized that the cadmium wasn't really, I couldn't get the right color for ketchup, so I would have to do a monochrome. But I have a dream that when the project ends, when we stop having capital punishment and the project ends, then, this was actually Jim Folt's idea, that I would talk to some exonerated inmates and find out what their first meal was when they were released from prison, and then paint a full color meal and then close the project. That's my dream.